So in my last video, I talked about how if your ping exceeds a certain amount, then you will literally start to take reduced knockback. And with how important knockback is in Minecraft PvP, this can be a huge advantage depending on the situation. However, that video got a lot of mixed feedback, and there are a lot of people saying that the reduced knockback is meaningless because of all the disadvantages that high ping causes. So in this video, I wanted to address some of the confusion from my last video and also explain some of the effects that lag has in PvP and whether or not it's an advantage or disadvantage. I do want to say before I start the video that if you do like my content and what I do, then you can consider checking out my Lunar Client cosmetics at the link in the description below. Every purchase of my Lunar Client cosmetics does help support me as an individual content creator, so if you want to help support me, then make sure to check them out. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. To understand how lag affects PvP, you need to understand that there's different types of lag that exist. So right here, I made a little diagram on paint. It's pretty scuffed, but I'm gonna use this to articulate my point. On the y-axis, we have your ping, and then on the x-axis, you have time. So if your ping looks like this, where it's not consistent, it's going up and down, you're having ping spikes, this is a disadvantage, regardless of the situation. If your ping is spiking, it's going up and down, and you can't control it, then that's always gonna be bad for you. Now, on the other hand, if your ping looks like this, where it's pretty much consistent, but your ping is super high, like 500 ms. This is better than having ping that's just constantly spiking up and down, but it's still overall a disadvantage when compared to low ping, since at this point, when you're getting up into like the 500 ms range, everything is so delayed that it sort of just makes it hard to play. However, if your ping isn't like 500 ms high, and it's something more reasonable, like say like 120 ms, and it's stable, this is where things start to become a lot more interesting in PvP, especially when compared to low ping. Now that you have that understanding on different types of lag, let's now talk about how lag impacts different aspects of PvP, and I want to start off with crystal PvP. In crystal PvP, you use the explosions from end crystals to deal damage to other players. These explosions contribute to a large portion of your damage in crystal, and if you're able to trigger more explosions, then that's going to increase your DPS by a substantial amount. With that being said, how does lag affect crystal PvP? So right now, I'm on a server where I have about 17 ms, and you can see on here, when I try spamming crystals, I can trigger a lot of explosions in a very short amount of time. I'm still on the same server, but now I'm connected to a VPN that's raising my ping to about 350 ms. But when I try to spam crystal now, you can see that my crystal speed is significantly slower. Like, it's really bad. This is a massive disadvantage in crystal PvP, and it decreases your DPS output by a lot if you're on higher ping. The reason this happens is because crystals are entities instead of blocks, and entities and blocks function very differently when it comes to how players interact with them. When you place a block in Minecraft, that block will place instantly client-side, and it will also break instantly client-side, regardless of what your ping is. Now, that doesn't mean that block placements and breaks are registered instantly by the server. If I place a block on the server, it will still take a while for it to register that a block has actually been placed there, depending on what my ping is. With blocks, you can pretty much break and place blocks as fast as you want, regardless of what your ping is to the server, and even though there is a delay for when the server actually registers that those blocks have been placed and broken, that block will still be broken at the same speed as how fast you're placing and breaking it on the client. Unlike placing blocks, which happens instantly client-side, when you spawn an entity, you have to wait for that entity to actually spawn into the server before you can actually interact with it. The same goes for breaking it, so if I break a block, you can see that client-side it breaks instantly, but if I try breaking this crystal, you can see that there's a significant delay for when I actually interact with it and when the crystal is actually registered to be broken by the server. Because you have to wait for the server to process every interaction that you have with an end crystal before you can interact with it again, and also because of the fact that you can only have one end crystal placed on one piece of obsidian at a time, this is what causes your crystal speed to be so slow when you have high ping, because you have to wait for the server to process every single interaction that you have with an end crystal before you can interact with it again, and this only gets worse the higher your ping is. Blocks don't have this inherent problem, and I can actually demonstrate this by using beds in the nether. When you right click on a bed in the nether, it explodes, similarly to a crystal. However, unlike crystals, on a server where I have almost 400 ms on, you can see that I can pretty much spam explosions as fast as I want. And when I start drag clicking, then you can really see just how many more explosions I'm able to cause, and it's honestly sort of funny. Once again, in a game mode where crystal explosions are a significant portion of your DPS, having high ping is a super big disadvantage in this. But with that being said, I am working on a fix for this right now, so you can crystal at the same speed regardless of what your ping is, so be on the lookout for that. The next thing I want to talk about is how lag affects shield-based PvP. In this clip, I'm on a server with my friend. He has 20 ms and I have 100 ms. In this clip, you can see that while I'm trying to attack my friend, he's able to shield every single one of my attacks while still being able to attack me. However, if we reverse roles, he's able to hit me through my shield and deal damage to me. point. This is an example of what's known as shield delay. When you're on a server and you use your shield, you have to wait for the server to register that your shield is being held up before it can start blocking any damage. The higher your ping is, the more that you have to wait for the server to register that your shield is actually being held. While this may seem like a big disadvantage, this also happens when you lower your shield. If you're on high ping, it'll still take a while for the server to register that you've lowered your shield, which lets you still block damage even if your shield is lowered client side. If you raise your shield for 1 second long, regardless if you're on low ping or high ping, you'll still block damage for 1 second long. If you're on high ping, you just need to raise and release your shield sooner to compensate for your ping. Now, you could make the argument that shield PvP on low ping is more reaction-based, while shield PvP on high ping is more prediction-based, and reaction-based mechanics are easier to master than prediction-based mechanics, making low ping an advantage for shield PvP. However, a lot of high ping shield players have already overcome this barrier, like Zilch for example. Zilch is a tier 1 axe player that gets 200 MS to North American servers, and they're still able to beat low ping players that are still really good because they know how to time their shield with their ping. I'll leave their channel in the description so you can see for yourself. I also want to talk about delayed hits and hits not registering, since I got a lot of comments about that in my last video. Okay, first of all, hits not registering only really happens when your ping is spiking like a ton, or if you're playing on a server with a bad anti-cheat. Delayed hits, on the other hand, aren't really the disadvantage that a lot of people think it is. You can get some really crazy delayed hits on high ping that just wouldn't be possible on low ping. Delayed hits don't cause your hits to not register, they're just delayed. Delayed hits are similar to shield delay in a sense where if you know how to time your hits while compensating for your ping, then they aren't really an advantage or disadvantage. The only case where delayed hits are really a disadvantage are when you and your opponent are both at 1 HP and the first person to get the hit wins, but that's so situational to the point where it really doesn't matter all that much. At the end of the day, lag isn't really an advantage or disadvantage for most game modes on the latest version, with the exception of Crystal PvP and Sword-based PvP. When it comes to Crystal PvP, it's a bit easier to look the other way since the Crystal problem only really happens with crystals and only affects one mainstream game mode. But when it comes to Sword-based PvP, there are so many game modes that utilize swords in them, and the reduced knockback advantage that higher ping players have affects all of them. By the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch my last video. In it, I explain how exceeding a certain ping range will literally reduce your knockback and how all of that works. I do want to clarify once again that there are different types of lag. If you have ping that's fluctuating all over the place, or your ping is stupidly high, whatever knockback advantage you have in sword-based PvP will be greatly diminished. However, if you have that sweet spot, 80 to 120 MS, where you start to take reduced knockback and your ping is stable, then it can become a really big advantage in PvP. I actually made a test server recently where we removed knockback scaling from it, making it so that everyone takes the same amount of knockback regardless of what their ping is, and it feels amazing. I did get a few comments on my last video saying that if knockback scaling was removed, then high ping players would be at a complete disadvantage, but that's simply not true. One of my favorite PvPers of all time is Defeat Boy, a player that lives in Korea that gets 200 MS to North American servers. Despite his ping, he would absolutely destroy leaderboards on Lunar, a server where knockback scaling is disabled. Now, I know Lunar is a 1.7 server and we're talking about 1.19 here, but sword-based PvP on 1.19 with knockback scaling disabled is pretty much the same as 1.7 PvP with an attack cooldown. If 1.7 players with high ping were able to take reduced knockback the same way that 1.19 players do, it would be absolutely game-breaking, but thank God that's not the case. One more thing I want to announce is that I'm actually working on a server that fixes the ping issues for both sword-based PvP and crystal PvP, so look forward to that because it's really exciting. Anyways, that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are when it comes to how lag affects PvP. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.